Now I want to turn to Steve Sherrill. What do you want to talk about, Steve?
Tonight we're going to talk about layout design and whether you have a loop, a shelf, point to point, multi-level, it makes no difference. You're going to have to put some tricks into your design when it comes to scenic and scenery. And some of the tricks that we're going to use are mirrors, forced perspective, um, creating a scene where you have a view block, which is nothing but scenery, which will mean that you will not be able to see the train move for a couple of seconds. It will give you the feeling of size and distance between locations. Um, One of the things that I like to use is forced perspective. And you can do that very easily by using different scales. Or one example is if you have crossbucks on one side of the track, the nearest one is a regular height. The one on the other side is a little shorter. Because you're a distance away, it should be shorter. One of the things I also use is a mirror on a track to nowhere, which is either surrounded by scenery or a tunnel portal. This is very effective. You have to make sure that you can't look directly into it. I had an open house a few years ago with some operators who that's all they do is go around the country operating other people's layouts. And so I had an operator and I was, watching everybody run the layout. And this guy had a little high solar and it wasn't moving. It was spinning and I couldn't figure out. I said, what's going on? What's going on? He said, well, I can't get this thing to move. It must be stuck on something. And I said, yeah, it's stuck on a brick wall on the other side of that mirror. And then he looked over directly into it. He saw it was a mirror. So I had created that illusion that that track actually went further. Another thing I did was I had my yard is connected to a Y and there's two towns. And all I did was put some scenery, about a foot and a half of scenery and about a foot high. And the switches actually backed up from one town to the next. And by creating the illusion that you couldn't see the train, you actually thought that it was further distance than it was. Um, so those are some of the things that I like to use. There are a lot of other ones, I'm sure. And maybe I know Bob Davidson in your business where you do a theater type. Bob, are you still here?
Yes, I am.
Bob, what kind of tricks do you use in your business to give a distance, smaller letters or something like that? Um, uh, Maybe you can give us some
Absolutely.
hints.
Yeah, force perspective is a great tool, and what you can do is not only in terms of using smaller scales. I love that you mentioned that because using a smaller scale in the background, and we've seen some examples, I think, in some presentations over the last 6 months, but also if you're building models from scratch, if you're scratch building, force perspective the building. So actually have the building vanish. You need to kind of pick a vanishing point and you can actually build, rather than having pure horizontal lines, they'll converge. And that can go a great way to just adding incredible depth to your scene.
Yeah, another thing is as roads go away from you, they get narrower. That creates distance also in the
Right.
illusion.
The other
Um,
thing too is, Steve, excuse me, the other thing too is in terms of your lighting. So if your foreground is lit to a higher intensity than your background, it's also going to give the illusion of more depth. So when you're lighting your layout, try to keep the bulk of your lighting in the foreground and reduce the lighting on your scenic background or buildings that are in the background. It's going to help help to enhance the depth of what you're showing?
Well, one of the things that I did with one of my layouts was I painted everything black, even the ceiling, and then I created what I wanted the people to see, with lights, and I thought it was wonderful. But when you turn the lights off, you couldn't see a damn thing. I mean, it was dark, man. It was something, but it was a really good experience, and I wanted to try it, and I did it. But it's about the lighting, but really, really, people could only see what I wanted them to see. In O scale, we tend to go directly to HO when we actually miss an opportunity to get something, a scale that's very close to us, and that's S scale. 148 is O scale, and 1/64th is S, and so we're actually closer to S scale. So there are things that we can use in S if we're going to do perspective. I don't know if other people have done some tricks. I don't know, Jeff Jordan, have you done any tricks like that on your railroad?
Yeah, I actually have several of the things you've mentioned. As we saw some time ago, the reproduction of the John Armstrong Nighthawks scene includes a mirror down the street, and it's angled in such a way you can't look into it, but it does extend the street back beyond the backdrop. And then I have two projects right now. One, a view block. Again, given the limited size of my layout, the view blocks really expand these, not taking everything in all at once. You have to look at the separate scenes individually. And then right now I am in the midst of a forced perspective project I found on eBay, out of production Campbell mill kit in N scale. And so I decided to put an abandoned mill way in the background on my ON30 layout. There's a ridge line and then another hillside behind that with the abandoned mill on it in N scale. One tip I read on working on forced perspective is using something that interrupts your view rather than just having the scenery appear to just tail off till it gets to the N scale building. There's an intervening ridge line and it's got trees on it. And so that kind of interrupts the flow and breaks it up so that the first ridge line and then the second ridge line, and also it needs a lot of trees. I started making trees from the evergreen trees from a kit of 70 trees, and I'm not sure that it's going to be enough. My recent trip to Colorado persuaded me that I needed a dense number of evergreen trees going up that ridge line and making them smaller as they go up.
Now, are you using like half trees into your backdrop?
Well, this is the first ridge line that goes in front of the N scale structure on the second ridge line. And so they're the evergreen Woodland Scenics. They sell a bag of 70 evergreen trees and they come flat. And so you can keep them flat if you want them in the back, or you can twist them to make them more three-dimensional. And right now I'm in the midst of twisting them and planting them so that the height decreases as it gets back. But I've only done about a dozen trees and I'm looking at a box of 60 trees waiting for me to put them together.
Well, okay, that sounds, yeah, we want to see that when you get that finished. Larry McDonald. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Jeff.
I just said I will definitely feature it once it's just a little bit further along. I have never been a hugely skilled scenery guy, and I'm experimenting with a lot of techniques in building this scenery. For example, I discovered Woodland Scenics material called moldacine,
Mhm.
which apparently is their equivalent of Sculptamold, but I
Yeah.
found that it's denser and lumpier than a Sculptamold, and it's pre-tinted. So as soon as you put it down, it's a tan color and it can't chip off and show white. So I've used that. And then I've also used Sculptamold where I wanted a more a softer or thinner ground cover. Um, and also I'm staying away from plaster because the plaster is so darn heavy.
Yeah, well, a lot of people are staying away from that. I only use the surgical wrap anyway.
Yep.
I mean,
Yep,
that's
I use that to make the structure from scratch. Started with cardboard strips from just cut up boxes and hot glue to make the most basic framework. Then covered that with the gauze impregnated with plaster to give it a continuous surface. And then the finish coat was either the Sculptamold or Moldacine.
well, when you put your surgical wrap down, make sure you have a brush, about a 1.5 inch brush, and some water. And when you put it down, put the brush and keeps brushing it across until you get that smooth surface. You know, that'll make it nice and strong. You shouldn't see any holes in that. There should be no holes in that material.
That's a good
Larry,
tip.
Larry McDonald,
Yes,
are you there, sir?
yes, I am.
What kind of Canadian tricks have you done up there?
Well, I don't know if I could give those kind of secrets away, but I can tell you what I've done.
Well, you can give those secrets away.
Right on the present layout, I have a mirror installed. It's still got the film over it because I'm doing plaster work in front of it. So I don't know if it's going to be totally successful or not. I have used mirrors in the past, particularly in street scenes. I like the idea of the two, when he was talking about two ridges with an N scale building back on the second ridge. When I was doing West Virginia, I didn't have that much depth, so I cut profile boards. And the first ones had trees in front with lichen, and the second one behind that was a green board but painted and sprinkled with some fine foam. And beyond that was another profile board. They were separated by about maybe 1/4 to 1/2 inch, and that gave me depth. And I was going back till you get to that blue profile for a mountain or hills farther away. So that was successful, and that's been used many times. It wasn't my idea. You get a lot of this from the press. But
Have you used any 148 cars and 143?
yes, and that's the thing. An awful lot of us do use the 143 cars, particularly old standard gauge people, but the engines are bigger. When you get in the narrow gauge, you put a 43 up beside the train, it just doesn't look right. And so, yeah, you try to find, there's more and more 48s coming out, but they were far and in between. You could get more 150 scale. Like
Yeah.
I brought out those Model A's, and they were 150. So they're nice in street scenes. You can put a larger scale 148 up near the front and put one of those farther down the street, not very far, say 6, 8 car lengths, and it just gives you that perspective of distance.
Yeah, we're lucky in O scale. We have the 43, the 48, and the 150s all available.
All depends on who you get for like 143. Different manufacturers. Some look quite scale, actually close to 48, yet they're calling them 43.
Yeah.
And a lot of there's a lot of British stuff, and or is it 143 the die cast? But there's more and more out there now in the last 10 years.
I read an article in a diecast collectors group, and they point out that many manufacturers are inaccurate as to their scale. They sell things as 143rd, and they're not actually 143rd.
Exactly.
Often you need to check the dimensions of the vehicle and measure the model, and you may find that some things that are sold as 143rd are actually as small as 150th.
That's exactly quite true. Yeah.
I didn't know. Well, that's something we can check on. Um, Tom Farrell, you still here?
I'm here.
Okay, let's hear what you've got. I know I'm still looking underneath that covered bridge to see that dam.
Well, yeah, on the new layout, I have if you do peek under that covered bridge, I put a view blocker, a dam there. I'm going to name it the Jim Kello Dam. But I wanted to make a quick comment on mirrors. Is everybody aware of the flat or single surface mirror? What are they called? Their specific name for them.
Front mirrored. They're on the front.
Yeah, it's a front reflecting mirror. On my
It's called
previous,
first surface mirror.
there you go. I had it and then I lost it. There's a thing called a first surface mirror. If you look at a conventional mirror, you'll see about however thick the glass is, you'll see a distortion because they silver the back of the mirror. On a first surface mirror, it's more applicable for our hobby use because you get a direct reflection without any distortion. And on my last rustic buff and old Gothic, I had a river that curved on a 45-degree into the background. And we went around the curve. And if you look back there, there was a mirror and it made the illusion that the river went on forever. And I used a first surface mirror.
Yeah.
And it wasn't cheap, but it wasn't expensive. I think it was roughly $20 or something like that, where you could go to like a craft store and just buy a mirror for a picture and be, $3 or $4. I went to the expense of getting this special mirror, and it made a difference. I mean, you could stare at that as long as you like, and it looked like that river went on forever.
Oh, wow. Had to be careful with mirrors, though. You really do.
I mean, you could not
You
get the
can't look directly into them because you'll see yourself.
Yeah, this was positioned. Maybe someday I'll feature a photo of that scene. I have it. No matter where you stood in the layout, you couldn't see yourself. It was kind of neat
Yeah.
feature. Yeah.
Mhm.
And
Well, that's really, there's a gentleman online, Dave Meek, and he's got a video out right now. He does Thunder Mountain Studio,
yeah,
and he's got understanding force perspective, and he goes into how Disneyland uses force perspective on their buildings with smaller windows at the top and that kind of thing. And he said a lot of that stuff you can use in modeling. And he demonstrates and shows some models that he's done. It's very good. So it's about a 9-minute video. So it's not, real long, but well worth watching to get some ideas.
Can you put a link, Steve, can you put a link to that in maybe New Tracks Modeling's Facebook group?
It's just Thunder Mountain Studio. I just look it up, and everything that guy does will come up if you look up on YouTube.
I just put it up in chat also, a link
Okay.
to that.
Yeah, great. And he's an excellent modeler. He's an 0-30 guy and 0-18 also, but he does a lot of styrofoam. He does a Western look, but there's just lots of things that we can do to make a layout seem bigger, give us some distance, little tricks. And if anybody else has a trick that they know, please go ahead and share it, because that's what this segment's all about, is talking about how we can make each other's layout look better and easier to build. So if anybody has anything else, we can certainly talk about it.
Okay, Steve, I'll show you guys a couple of pictures of a view. This is a view block. So force scale, force perspective is where you either, have things be different scales so that things farther back look smaller than the actual distance would make them look. This is actually a slightly different thing. This is really around a view block. So this is an O scale layout, fairly large and long. Just to give you an idea, when people come in, they come in down by this far wall. And the first thing they see is this area with some mountains and some mountain scenery. But we built a city up here, and the city is also visible. So what I want you to see here, actually, this is the back of a view block. So if you look at that, that's actually a plaster wall that's about 3 inches thick. And this is a hill that actually goes across there. So if you look, that's the city. So hang on, let me get rid of this one if I can. And get rid of it that way. So this is actually a view of that view block. So this is taken up a bit. If you're down at 5.6 to 5.9, the trees here block out the tops of the buildings. But this is basically a very thin wall. There's a tunnel that goes in here. There are tunnels underneath here. There's a trolley that comes down here. This is a retaining wall. Originally, the station was here and moved it over here so it becomes another scene. But this hill right here is actually built on a piece of plywood, and is actually let me see. I think I got the wrong pictures here now. Is actually, you can see it there. This is actually built with foam and the foam rocks. So the whole thing weighs about 7 or 8 pounds, and you can take this out so you can service the tracks underneath it and get the tracks over here. So it's kind of a way when you come in, you don't see the city. You can kind of see how it blocks the city there, so that your view doesn't go down. And so you kind of walk along here, and you see 2 different scenes here. Then you see the city, and then you look back around these tracks, and that actually leads you back to seeing the station, which, if you can see, is kind of to the right there. So when you look down here, you see the station. That's the next project, is to get this all lit up and put an interior in it. So the idea is in about 20 feet, to create 4 or 5 different scenes that kind of controls where your eye goes as you walk through that area.
Boy, that's really, that is really special. Congratulations, Phil. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's very nice.